Welcome to the Grand Strand Weekly Web Chat. We're now into the second week of the high school football playoff season for the 3A, 2A, and 1 schools in Class 4A. At least one team from the Grand Strand area is heading to the postseason. Not quite sure how long they'll party in the postseason. Anyway, we'll talk about all that and a little bit more with these two guys, Ian Guerin of the Sun News and Matt Paris of ESPN Radio. We kind of talked briefly before here. We'll have this episode of Wednesday for all you die-hard Grand Strand Weekly Web Chatters. Then we're going to do a postseason award edition of the Grand Strand Weekly Web Chat next week. Are you guys excited?
I'm jacked.
Absolutely
jacked.
I think most people are excited that they're watching this right now because they're just glad that they don't have to read their own Twitter and Facebook feeds to see all the Republican and Democratic comments.
It's over, people. It's over.
Let it go.
We can just concentrate on football again.
Yeah, let it go.
Actually, I was concentrating on football last night. Ball State Toledo. That was the real Ohio race that was running on.
You can't stop MAC football. It's where it's at.
Anyway, it was a fun week last week. We had, especially on the Grand Strand, probably one of the biggest upsets that none of us saw happened at Carolina Forest. Let's go through the week that was, and there's the first game on there. In double overtime, was it double or triple? Double. Carolina Forest 27-24 in thrilling fashion to get their second win of the season. The asterisk is obviously Mikel Moody didn't play. Carolina Forest doesn't care about that. They got a big win. Did you see it come? Matt, we'll start with you.
I absolutely didn't see that coming at all. I mean, you look at the game beforehand. It's senior night. It's the last game of the season for these guys. Obviously, they get hyped up for this game. But I mean, add to that Mikel Moody not playing. Maybe you can go back in time and say, okay, maybe that makes sense. But no, I didn't see this coming at all.
And maybe Mikel Moody not playing. Maybe they thought they could win without him. If the kid's not healthy and he has a college future, you don't, obviously criticize Coach Chuck Jordan for sitting him, because if he's hurt and if he's not 100%, you don't want to risk the kid.
Well, and Chuck said something to me on Saturday when the playoff bracket came out that made a lot of sense. And he had repeated it after saying it the first time, that his biggest concern with Mikel was that he could not protect himself. If the kid doesn't have his wheels, and if he takes a shot, it doesn't matter if they win that game or not, because then maybe they're without him for the postseason. In his mind, if he played him at all, even if he didn't take a big hit, they were going to be a worse playoff team because he played against Carolina Forest. And the way they played in the second half against Sumter the week before without Mikel, it made sense. If the kid's at risk, if he can't defend himself, if he's going to get hurt, to the point where it affects your playoff chances, just don't play the kid. I don't think anybody with or without Mikel Moody playing saw Carolina Forest beating Conway.
You're exactly right, and that we're starting to kind of feel like we're talking ESPN here, but we're like, hey, the Dallas Cowboys lost, and we're forgetting that the Atlanta Falcons actually beat them. Right. The Carolina Forest Panthers are the one that won this game, right. And I think this says a lot about this team because they had one win. They could have easily given up on their coach, given up on their seniors. This is senior night. But credit goes to all those guys. The defense still hung in there. The offense scored points. They didn't look bad. Rivalry game and everything. This was a great win.
It's fantastic. I mean, it's a great win. They were moving the ball. They put points on the board. I mean, we kept seeing the scores come out. I talked to you on Friday night, like, wow, this is crazy that these teams are both in this game. Obviously Conway, but Carolina Forest in this game all the way through, and to go to overtime, 2 overtimes. It's unreal.
I thought Carolina Forest, watching that first half after I left in the middle of the second quarter to head to Socastee, I was like, Carolina Forest is going to win this game. They were playing a more physical brand of football.
Well, and I think it's a huge win for Carolina Forest. I mean, you had mentioned them not giving up on Coach Drew Hummel and everything, but there are any given week between 9 and 12 sophomores starting for Carolina Forest. Yeah, they're losing Harold Atkinson. Yeah, they're losing a couple linemen. But the majority of their skill guys are sophomores and juniors. All those guys now can enter, next year saying that they beat Conway for the second time in school history. That's a big thing for Carolina Forest. The biggest school in the area. They haven't had any playoff success at the 4A level because they haven't qualified for the playoffs. But this was their playoff game, as a bunch of people were saying last week. I mean, they beat Conway. They're one of only 2 teams in Carolina Forest history that can now say that.
And they've beaten Conway in 2 of the last 3 seasons. Right. So that's pretty cool. All right, we talked a lot about Conway, Carolina Forest. Let's get into some of the other matchups that were playoff games last week. Myrtle Beach knocked off Manning 43-14. They jumped out on them quick and kind of ran away with that then at the end. We'll talk a little bit more about Myrtle Beach as they have a big game coming up this week. Sockasty over Crestwood. They also have a big game coming up this week against Berkeley. Sockasty, they just took care of business. They jumped out to a 17-0 lead. It looked like in the third quarter, maybe the momentum could turn with Crestwood's big drive, but Sockasty, put the pedal to the metal. We got to give you a chance to talk about the Braves, right?
Like you said, they went in there and they took care of business. They got it done, and yeah, you're right. The third quarter, there was a big drive Crestwood made to put some points on the board. But like I've been saying every week, this team comes to play and they get it done, and they got it done again. So.
Yeah, and what kind of shocks me with Sockasty, a couple weeks ago I thought that Wilson would give them a hard time because of the size. Crestwood was a very physical team, an athletic team, and Sockasty just stood up, took the punch, and then took it on the chin, and then kept going, and then kept fighting, and dominated this game. Sockasty's not scared of size, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I mean they just keep doing what they do. That's 8 straight double-digit wins. They're obviously 11-0. Everybody's going to concentrate on that, but these games, the final tallies aren't even close, and that's the thing with Sockasty that's been really impressive to me is no matter who they're playing, they're winning every game by double digits. I mean that's a big thing for that team. Is
it the only game they've not won by double digits was against Carolina Forest at the beginning of the year, or they beat them by 10?
Week 0 and week 2, Lakeview, I believe, or Lake City maybe.
It
was like an 8-point game, so it was close too. But
all right, other playoff games. I think Aner ended up knocking off Kingstree 44-36, and Aner's going to go to League Central. We'll talk about that in a second. A couple other matchups from Week 11/playoffs of Week 1. All these are playoff games. In 2A, Mullins taking on Andrews and beat them 18-7. Battery Creek knocks off Waccamaw 21-14, and probably the stunner of the Grand Strand area, pseudo Grand Strand teams, Carvers Bay losing as a 1 seed after having a couple of victories over 3A opponents in the regular season against a rival Hemingway. Is this just clear fact, Ian, that anything can happen in a rivalry game?
Yeah, you throw 2 region opponents, against each other for the second time, in the playoffs. Nate Thompson was worried about that game. He felt better if they could get through that one. What would happen the rest of the way? Carvers Bay beat Hemingway 32-7 in the regular season, but don't forget that before that, Hemingway had won 5 straight games in the season. In that series, there's a reason why that happened. These teams are very close. All the kids know each other, all that good stuff. So, that was easily the shocker of the first week of the playoffs for me, though.
Any thoughts on that, Carvers Bay?
I honestly thought Carvers Bay would take this one down, but it is a rivalry game, and that's why they play the games.
I think one thing that, it's all throughout all of sports. How kids, how athletes, no matter how old you are, if you're a 10-year-old playing high school baseball, or not high school baseball, but Little League baseball, or a senior playing high school football or college or pro, how do you handle success? And sometimes, everyone's patting you on the back. You guys are the best team. You're heading to the playoffs. Don't even worry about this. And all of a sudden, you forget about what's right in front of you. I'm not saying it happened. I'm not saying Hemingway didn't play a great game, but sometimes you just forget about what's going on right here, and all of a sudden it's gone. So, but kudos to Hemingway. They're a PD team, and they've been to the postseason. They know how to win the postseason. Maybe not the biggest game, but they've lost the Class A title the last 2 years, or the lower state final. But yeah, it was a big win for Hemingway. All right, now let's look ahead to playoff week number 2. Here's our games of the week. We threw Hemingway in our PD game of the week. They're taking on Johnsonville, and they'd be giant slayers if they could take off Carvers Bay and Johnsonville in back-to-back weeks. I know that Johnsonville's not a Grand Strand team, so we won't really talk about that. But let's talk a little bit about this Berkeley-Sockasty game. Do we see Berkeley giving Sockasty problems? I know this is a team that the Braves beat last year in the postseason to get to that second round.
Berkeley's 5-6, but that 5-6 is extremely misleading. They beat Timberland, who was probably the favorite to win the Class 2A Division I title. They played pretty well on region ball. They lost their first 3 or 4 games this year, but they had a slew of injuries. So, again, Sockasty people don't look at that 5-6 record and think this is going to be a cakewalk, because this is a very good Berkeley team with 5 state titles in its history, and they've played for another 5 and finished as runner-up. So.
Yeah, Matt, I know everyone's going to be looking at the playoff bracket and say, hey, Hartsville next week, kind of like maybe Carver Space said, Johnsonville next week. How important is it for Coach Renfro to keep his guys focused?
Got to keep them focused, and that's one of the things he's been very good at this year with these guys week to week, getting them focused for that week's game and then not looking too far in the future. Yeah, if you look at the bracket, you see Hartsville back there. It's kind of scary, I know, for Braves fans, because Hartsville's a very good team as well. They've got that emotional thing going for them as well going into the playoffs. But, Renfro's really good at getting these guys hyped up for every game, one at a time, and I think he'll continue to do that.
Yeah, you're right, because, I mean, even earlier in the season when they're playing like Lakeview, a Class A opponent, they, put the pedal to the metal like 28-0 to start out of the gate. So, they're not – They don't overlook anybody, and I guess that's a good thing. Some of the other matchups, I guess, for the playoffs, week number 2, there's really not that many teams left here in the Grand Strand. I guess that's good for Ian over there in the Sun News coverage. But
I'm doing the same thing every week. It really doesn't matter.
But you said, other than Conway, there's a chance that all these 3 of those teams can win, and then Socastee 4. Let's start at the top. Conway at Goose Creek. Goose Creek's a top 25 team in the nation. They can score at will. They might be able to give college teams a run, right? You know that argument that.
Can we stop with that? Can we stop with that? Yeah, Goose Creek. They got a former Division I head coach now coaching them. He spent time as an offensive coordinator at both Clemson and South Carolina. He basically runs his team like a small college team. I mean, they have a lot of media coverage. They have 5 or 6 guys that have major Division I offers, including a kid named Tremel Terry, who is basically got 20-something offers right now and can do anything on the field at any given time. They are bigger than everybody they're going to play. They are ranked number 11 in the USA Today Super 25. They are ranked number 1 in the state of South Carolina. I have no –
Are they better than Northwestern, though?
They are better than Northwestern. They are better than Burns. I will say that right now from everything I've seen of them. They will win the Class 4A Division II title unless something very, very weird happens. Conway, I wrote it earlier in the week. If Conway beats Goose Creek, it is the upset of the year in South Carolina football.
What would be the upset so far of the year in South Carolina? Maybe Socastee over Myrtle Beach?
I don't know.
Not anymore.
11-0 and 10-1. That looks a little different. But yeah, Conway. I mean, they've obviously got some issues with Mikhail Moody. They need to make sure he's healthy and get him ready to play. He's probably the only chance, with him in that game of it staying close.
Is he going to play?
I think he will. They're taking it easy with him. They're not going to pound on him in practice too much this week just to make sure.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure if there's a chance.
Yeah, they're going to have to throw everything they've got, and that includes Mikhail Moody. Even if he's not 100%, you've got to throw your best at these guys. I was down when Carolina Forest played them at Goose Creek earlier in the year. Obviously, Carolina Forest nowhere near a Conway in that regard, but they hung in there the first half. They were moving the ball, and they had some rhythm going. If you can keep the offense off the field, you can hang in there for a little while. But if you don't have the athletes to keep up with these guys for 4 quarters, there's not really a chance.
And if I'm not mistaken, after Goose Creek was leading 14-6 at halftime, they scored 40 unanswered in the second half. So that's what they do. They dismantle teams with that size, with the running game, with the occasional passing game. I mean, a lot of people think that they're throwing the ball over the field. That's really not the case. They just run over people.
So should be a fun one out there in Goose Creek. That's what you're trying to say.
For Goose Creek fans, yeah.
That's a tough drive to make for what's
it's like an hour and a half.
Is it that far?
Yeah,
it's not long.
Charleston area.
All right,
yeah.
At least it's not down to like Hilton Head or something. No. Myrtle Beach at Hanahan. And Hanahan, they won their region title. They get the opportunity to host Myrtle Beach, probably a tough team for them to prepare for. On the other hand, Myrtle Beach has the challenge of playing on the road. But I have a feeling that these Seahawks are on a mission.
I love this matchup. I mean, this is great. I mean, this is a matchup that should be played next week or the lower state finals or something. I mean, these are 2 10-1 teams. I talked about Berkeley earlier beating Timberland. Timberland's the only team this year that's beaten Hanahan. So, I mean, you've got 2 very evenly matched teams as far as points per game, points allowed, that kind of thing. They occasionally struggle with turnovers, but they're just so good everywhere else on the field that they tend to make up for those mistakes very quickly.
What jumped out about Myrtle Beach's first playoff game? You watched the whole thing. didn't they have some good defensive plays that turned into points?
Yeah, I mean, it's the usual suspects for the Myrtle Beach defense. I mean, Octavius Thomas, I think he had like 1 billion tackles or something the other night. I mean, he's up over, 170 for the year now. Sean Michael Orcutt with a big interception, even though he's got his hand basically in a club. I mean, offensively, they throw some nice passes to Renard Pointer, Trell Harrell, a couple huge plays in the third and fourth quarter. I mean, it's all of the usual suspects from Myrtle Beach, and they're really starting to shine now that everybody is healthy. It was the first time all year that Myrtle Beach had dressed out every player on its varsity roster, and they're getting to where they need to be at exactly the right time of the year.
All right, you got Myrtle Beach winning this one. Let's go down the road.
I think it's going to be a really close game. I think it's going to come down to a defensive stand or a turnover late. I think Myrtle Beach can win this game. I think they have a good chance.
I'm gonna go ahead and say Myrtle Beach. I know Hanahan has some history as well, but when you got Myrtle Beach that usually plays 3 or 4 weekends into the playoffs, they're used to playing these playoff games, these high pressure games. So I think that gives them a little bit of an advantage, even if it's a different crop every year. But they've been there, they've done that.
Yeah, I like Myrtle Beach in this one too. If no other reason, Hanahan has just recently moved up from Class 2A. I mean, they're still getting used to a higher level playoff bracket and having to beat these teams each week and week in and week out. And Myrtle Beach has been doing this for years. They've been going through this playoff schedule for the last 7, 8, 9 years. They're used to it. I think it gives them the edge.
It's almost like Myrtle Beach with their 4A schedule at the beginning. They start with the playoff schedule, then they kind of get healthy, and then they finish up with the playoff run, and all their guys are battle tested, which I think helps them out in the long run. So Mickey Wilson, he knows what he's doing over there.
It's all by design. They've been doing that.
Yeah, other matchups we won't spend too much time as we've already gone over 15 minutes. Battery Creek at Loris. I don't think Loris should have any problem with Battery Creek. Would both of you agree with that?
Yeah, Loris wins that game.
By at least 3 touchdowns, maybe even 4. Ainer at Lee Central. We'll finish with this one. This one's kind of a fun one. Lee Central playing in that 2A region 6 or 7. Yeah, they had a great season. Yep. I think they finished second behind Timberland. They had a pseudo region title game with them. Ainer's a tough team to prepare for. I just think that Ainer's going to be the underdog in this one, just based on, even though Ainer has good athletes, I think Lee Central has better athletes.
Yeah, what is it in the NFL? You get 3 points for your point spread
Home
if you're playing at home. That is essentially why I think Lee Central is has the edge in this game. I mean, they are 2 very, very evenly matched teams. Neither one of them have much history. I mean, Lee Central's only 12 or 13 years old. This is easily the most wins they've had outside of maybe 1 year. Ainer, last year, they're still building off that playoff win from last year. I think they've got a very, very good shot at going on the road and winning 2 playoff games for the first time in I think it'll be about 24, 25 years.
8 wins this season. It's crazy. They're going to be trying to go for 9. It's unheard of if you thought about this 2 years ago.
Right.
Final thoughts. Just going into week 2 of the playoffs, Matt.
Well, I think it's exciting that we've got this many teams going in to playoff games right now, and Conway's obviously got a difficult road to hoe right now, but Sox City, Myrtle Beach, I think those are going to be great games as well. All the games I think are pretty evenly matched. Maybe not that Battery Creek game with Loris, but it's exciting.
Yeah. Final thoughts? I mean, you're going to be at the Sox City Berkeley game, and it's supposed to be a good one.
Yeah, sneak preview, fans. Big story on Friday coming out, and it's all about what Socrates' defense has done and how they are overlooked. I mean, they have forced 31 turnovers this year. They've only had 9 on offense. That's a +2 per game margin. That's why they're winning these games this big. If they do anything like that on Friday night, I have no reason to believe they won't keep rolling.
Yeah, I expect Sox City to win. Myrtle Beach, they should be around. Loris is I think Loris is a shoo-in for a victory. Expect 3 Grand Strand teams to keep alive in the playoffs. He's Ian, the Sun News. Read him while you can in front of that paywall. It's coming.
December 5th.
No, I don't know. I think anybody really understands that except us until December 5th, and you'll understand. Yeah. Matt Paris of ESPN Radio. You can catch him also Sidekick on the Drive, 4 o'clock, if you want to listen to him Monday through Friday on the Grand Strand 100.3. And the Blitz will be on Friday nights in the fall. All right, thanks for watching. We'll see you next week. One last episode of the Grand Strand Weekly Web Chat.